Welcome to the Explainer. Ireland's climate is definitely changing. So in this Explainer, we're going to cut through the noise, look at the hard data, and see what that actually means for the future of the island.
We all hear those big global headlines, right? The world is getting warmer. But what does that actually mean for us here in Ireland? Let's zoom right in, past the global trends, and focus on what's happening in our own backyard.
Okay, so to set the stage, we've got to be on the same page about one thing. The science is solid. Human activity has already warmed up the planet by about 1 degree Celsius. This is our global starting point for everything else we're about to talk about. So that's the big picture. First up, we're going to connect that global trend to what's happening locally. How does that 1 degree shift actually show up, right here in Ireland? All right, now for part 2. To really understand where we're headed, we have to look at where we've been. We're going to dig into the hard data, the measurable, observable changes that have already happened to our climate.
And yeah, the data couldn't be clearer. Ireland's climate is changing right in step with global trends. Our average temperature is already up by almost a full degree compared to where it was back in 1900.
And listen, this isn't some random fluke, a one-off warm year. We're talking about a persistent pattern, 9 years in a row, with above normal temperatures. That tells you that warmer years are pretty much becoming the new normal.
But it's not just about the heat, it's the rain, too. I mean, look at this. When scientists compare two big 30-year chunks of time, they see a 5% jump in the average amount of rain we get every year.
And this warming trend isn't just on land, it's happening in our seas. Now, what's really wild about this is the speed of the change. Our sea surface temperatures are heating up at a rate that the source material calls, and I'm quoting here, unprecedented in the 150-year observational record. That's a really big deal.
Okay, so that's the story of what's already happened. Now for the really interesting part. What's next? How do climate models predict these trends are going to continue? This is where it gets fascinating.
By the middle of this century, which, isn't that far away, average temperatures are projected to rise by at least another degree. And you can see here, the exact amount really hinges on which path we take globally when it comes to our emissions.
And this slide really shows you how complex this all is. It's not as simple as just more rain. We're looking at a future of extremes, much drier springs and summers, which could lead to things like water shortages, paired with much wetter winters and autumns, with a big jump in heavy rainfall. And all that extra winter rain, well, it's connected to this. Projections show that more intense storms are likely to form out over the North Atlantic, and their path might just steer them over Ireland more often than before.
At the exact same time, sea levels around the world are rising, and the rate is speeding up. For an island nation, well, you don't need me to tell you that has some pretty direct and serious consequences for our coastline.
So that brings us to our fourth section, the ripple effect. Because these numbers, degrees of temperature, millimeters of sea level, they're not just abstract stats on a chart. They translate into real-world impacts that we can feel. And here's the crucial point. Think about it. Where are our biggest cities? Dublin, Cork, Galway, Limerick. They're all coastal. That puts our main population centers, our economic engines, right on the front line when it comes to the threat of rising sea levels. And that vulnerability creates this whole cascade of knock-on effects. We're talking more flooding, both from the coast and from rivers swelling. We're looking at damage to our homes, our roads, our infrastructure. And remember those drier summers? That means potential water stress for farmers and for our public supply. It even changes the distribution of plants and animals and can have a real impact on our own health.
So this brings us to our final section. We've seen the projections, we understand the potential impacts. The massive question now is, what do we do with all this information?
A really key concept here is adaptation. Now, this isn't about stopping climate change entirely because some changes are already locked in. Adaptation is all about preparing for those unavoidable impacts, things like building better sea defenses or developing crops that can handle drier summers.
But the source material is crystal clear about this. While we absolutely must adapt, the scale of that challenge, how much we have to do, is directly tied to how successful we are at cutting emissions. The two are completely connected. The less we emit globally, the less we'll have to scramble to adapt locally.
So we're left with this final, really thought-provoking question. We know some impacts are coming no matter what. But what all this data also shows is that our actions today have profound power. They won't determine if the future is different, but they will absolutely determine how different it's going to be.